Okay, good night. Welcome. We are beginning tonight with Roman numeral 4, letter C. Okay, we talked last time about the laws of kosher food as they're found in the Torah. We talked about what that may signify, even some of the symbolism of it, some of the meaning behind it. And we think we began to talk about, and we'll talk explicitly about the things that you wouldn't know just from reading the Torah. The Torah talks about animals you can and can't eat, fish and birds you can and can't eat. Torah talks about parts of animals that can't be eaten. And that's where things are. The big rabbinic addition to the laws of kosher food as they're found in the Torah is this understanding of ta'am ki ikar. The taste of the thing is like the thing itself. And so not only do we not eat the non-kosher substances, we also don't eat things that have been contaminated by the taste of something non-kosher, okay? And so the rabbis had a whole physics of how they thought this worked, chemistry, I don't know, like the particles of taste as they transfer from the non-kosher food into something that they're cooked with or cooked adjacent with or in proximity with. And basically they understand ta'am, this taste, as a substance that, taste is a substance that moves from object to object when there are things are either soaking together for more than 24 hours or when things are in contact with intense heat. That's the basic rule, okay? So piece of pork falls into your stew and you remove it, but it was there in your hot stew, okay? So you have to be concerned that maybe the taste of the pork infiltrated the stew, and so that could render your stew non-kosher, okay? They understood, that at anything less than 60 times volume is too minute of to impart taste. So if you remove the chunk of pork from your stew, and that chunk of pork was less than 60 times the volume of the stew remains kosher. But if the pork that fell in was more than 60 times the volume of the stew, then you're concerned because maybe the taste, even though you removed the actual thing, the taste may have been imparted into the substance. Okay, so that's ta'am ki ikar, that the taste of the thing is a problem, and taste can also be absorbed in pots and pans and forks and knives and things like that. Anything that comes into hot contact with the food can absorb its taste, and that taste can be then expunged into the next thing that you cook. You could make a big clam chowder. The taste of the clam is absorbed into your chowder pot, and then you cook some pasta in that pot. A few hours later, the pasta absorbs the taste of the clams. Now, you may say this doesn't happen. So maybe it doesn't happen with stainless steel appliances and pots and pans, but with pre-modern, stainless steel was invented in the 20th century, okay? Before stainless steel, you definitely knew that your pots and pans and forks and stuff, absorbed taste and imparted it into the things that you ate subsequently. So it was definitely an observed phenomenon. The physics of this was real. With stainless steel, we don't really observe it anymore. Maybe it's not true anymore. There are rabbis who say the whole thing is, if you have stainless steel, maybe you don't have to be as concerned. We treat stainless steel like any other metal, though. That's sort of our universal practice. But, maybe there's some suggest that maybe you shouldn't have to. But in any case, this is all because we're worried about the taste of the thing. So not only are we concerned about the ingredients being kosher, like no pork or shellfish or things like that, we're also concerned about the pots and pans and things used for cooking the kosher food, that they were used exclusively for kosher food, so they don't give over the taste. The non-kosher taste was absorbed in them prior to cooking the kosher food. Questions, comments about this? Okay. There's a small group, so you can unmute yourself if you want to say something, okay? Or use the chat if you're shy about being muted, okay? But using your voice. Okay. Let's try. Okay. So she's gonna come. All right. Next item is mixtures of meat and milk. So the Torah says, "Lo tevashel gedi b'chelev hamo," do not boil a kid in its mother's milk. The Torah says that 3 times, and we understand that those 3 times to be, the rabbis understood what that means. That it means not a literal don't boil a kid in its baby goat in its own mother's milk, but don't cook any dairy and meat together. Don't eat dairy and meat that have been cooked together, and don't derive benefit from dairy and meat that have been cooked together of any kind, right? And so that's the meat and milk separation that we have in kosher law. So that's a rabbinic read of what's that is in the Torah. So we consider that a deraita rule, but we then apply also the same rules of ta'am ki ikar, of absorbed taste as well. And so not only cooking the meat and meat to get milk and meat together, dairy and meat together. But if you have a pot that was used for meat and then you were to cook some dairy in it, you would have the absorbed taste in the pot coming out of the pot and contaminating the dairy that you cook in that pot. Okay, if you fry a dairy pancake batter in your frying pan, that would, then you use that frying pan right after to fry up some sausage, hamburger, whatever, something like that, right? So that meat is going to absorb the taste of the dairy that was absorbed in the frying pan when you use it for pancakes just a few hours ago. Okay, so not only do we have kitchens in which the utensils, pots, pans, etc., are exclusively used for kosher food, we also have kitchens in which we have separate pots and pans, silverware for cooking meat foods and for cooking dairy foods. Okay, kosher kitchens need lots of cupboard space. Okay, because you have your pots that you use for cooking dairy and pots used for cooking meat. So if you're cooking something that's neutral, some eggs, some fish are not meat, okay, some vegetables, some pasta, you can use whichever pot you want. But for dairy foods and meat foods, you need to have separate designated pots for those. And silverware as well. And we have plates also, that are separate for dairy and for meat. Okay, and this is why, okay, because we're concerned. The Torah says, was she able to? Someone tried to join, she wasn't. All right, whatever. Okay. The Torah says, don't boil a kid in its mother's milk, and we, 3 times, and we understand that to be a biblical prohibition against any type, again, against eating any dairy with any meat that were cooked together. You can't cook them together, you can't eat them together if they were cooked together, you can't derive benefit from them, which means you can't sell it or feed it to somebody else, or right, we're sort of more strict than some other non-kosher food. You can be in the business of selling non-kosher food, but you can't. But dairy and dairy meat you can't even sell or serve to somebody else. So it's a little, in that case, it's in that way it's more strict. Questions about this? Questions, comments?
I had a question.
Great.
With alternative foods, whether it's alternative meat with milk or the other way around, is there any concern with restaurants or giving the appearance that it looks like you're mixing the two?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say, the short answer is no, because everyone knows that there is such a thing as fake cheese or fake meat and stuff like that, right? Everyone knows that those things exist. And so there's no concern about, those appearances. That's the short answer, right? Once everyone knows, then we're not as worried about, oh no, look as though you're doing, right? But, at a time where people didn't know, then it would be a concern, right? The Shulchan Aruch in the 1600s, 1500s talks about, it's kind of gross, so I apologize, talks about drinking fish blood, drinking blood. The Torah prohibits drinking or consuming blood. That's actually, we didn't talk about that yet. The Torah says don't consume blood. You have to drain the blood from meat before you eat it. But you're allowed to consume fish blood. So if you're going to drink fish blood, put some scales in the glass of fish blood that you're drinking, so that everyone knows that it's fish blood and not blood of an animal. And so it's obvious to everyone. So I find it's just revolting, but whatever, people had different tastes back then. I don't know. But I guess the modern equivalent of that would be, and I think in the 50s and 60s, when non-dairy creamer was invented. So you would have a meal, you go to a wedding reception, they would bring out coffee at the end, and then it'd be creamer. They would put the little thing of non-dairy creamer, the container, the carton would be on the table. So it would be obvious to everyone that this was non-dairy creamer. I think now it's been decades, everyone knows there's such a thing as non-dairy creamer. It's not, it's there's so many alternatives to milk, it's just obvious. I think the same would be true at a restaurant, they know it's impossible meat, or it's impossible cheese or whatever, it's fake something. My wife and I once had a meeting with my mother-in-law, and she bought a lasagna at one of the kosher takeout places where she lives in Teaneck. There's a kosher, it had a meat side and a dairy side. We didn't know if it was from the meat side and was fake cheese, or if it was from the dairy side and was fake meat. And we had the whole thing, and we didn't know which one it was. It was very, very funny. Hi, Mina. Thanks for joining us. We started at 8:45, and I'm going to share the sheet right now so you can follow along, okay? We just got up to, we're in Roman numeral 4, talking about D, letter D in Roman numeral 4. Okay. So welcome. Thanks for joining. Any other questions about what we just said? Lily, did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, great. Terrific. Okay. Okay. All right, let's go on. Next, okay, bugs. Torah says you can't eat insects, okay? Creepy crawlies, right? The only animals you're allowed to eat are animals, like, animals that split hooves and chew their cud, but you can't eat, weasels or rats or snakes or insects, okay? So you can't eat insects. Insects generally, right? You have to remove them from the food you eat. That's generally, which is, shouldn't be too challenging. Except some foods are oh, hi, Mia, welcome. I'm going to share once again in the chat. I'm sharing the source sheet so you can follow along. Okay. We are where are we? We are Roman numeral 4, letter D. If you want to, okay, I'll just share that in the chat. So thanks for joining, everyone. So the Torah says eating insects basically are forbidden. The Torah says you can't eat insects, and that's generally not such a problem, except certain types of vegetables and fruits are hard to get really clean. So you got to wash them really carefully. Raspberries, strawberries, broccoli, things like that. You got to be careful. And here you see like differences. Some work, some like big kosher food organizations are extremely strict with, they have to like shave off the skin of the strawberry, like extremely strict. I don't think that's really necessary. I think they're not quite as infested as they are claiming they are, but for straw, but you should make sure you don't eat insects, even insects that are very small. If they're visible to the naked eye, are not kosher to eat. If they're invisible, if they're microscopic, that's not a problem. But if you can actually see them, if you look carefully, then you have to remove them from your fruits and vegetables. So you wash them carefully, soak them in water. I add a little bit of vinegar to the water, which in theory stuns them a little bit, and then I rinse them vigorously. I do that way. I cut them into pieces, broccoli, things like that, soak them, rinse them vigorously to get, and then I look. If and every so often you see like a nice big worm that you would have missed, so that's good. Take that out, don't eat that. And if you see little flies and stuff floating in the water as you're soaking it, so do another rinse and make sure it gets clean. That's my opinion. Again, there are some who are more strict. I think what I've described is sufficiently careful to get insects, visible insects, out of the food you eat. We said before, I mentioned a few minutes ago, that if it's things less than 1/60th of the volume, it's nullified. The taste isn't imparted. You don't care about it. But an insect that's an intact organism is not nullified, even in 60 times its volume. And so that's why an insect, even if it's like small, if it's visible, you got to remove it. You can't count it just being nullified if it's an intact organism. Yes, Lily.
Sorry to ask another question again, but I was under the impression from actually my neighbors down the street that certain insects are kosher.
Yes, very good.
Like
Excellent. Yes, locusts, they're like grasshoppers. A species of grasshoppers and locusts are kosher. The Torah does say that grasshoppers and locusts are kosher, but every Jewish community over the centuries has lost the tradition of what precisely are the species of locust grasshoppers that are kosher and what are not, except for the Yemenites, who maintained over thousands of years this tradition of these are the kosher species of locust grasshoppers, and they continue to eat them through the centuries. And today, like in the last 5 years in Israel, there are insect for food companies that have kosher supervision. They have been breeding and selling and processing the species of locust grasshoppers that the Yemenites have verified. Like these are when the Torah says that there's one species of grasshopper you can eat, like these are what they are, and we've been eating them for centuries. And so I would feel comfortable. You can, if you find grasshoppers or locusts with kosher supervision, or your Yemenite friend, like serves them to you, then you can eat them.
So there's like written down that these are exclusions.
Written in the Torah, but the Torah doesn't have illustration, so you need like a tradition of like what exactly it is, which is not unlike birds. The Torah doesn't give like rules for birds; it just lists species of birds. So you need like a tradition that like this is a bird that a Jewish community has eaten for centuries in order to have a bird that's kosher, even if it seems similar to other kosher birds.
Okay.
Great, good question. Yeah.
Okay, talking about tradition and how that then follows through, wasn't it originally kosher and it wasn't until recently that it became unkosher?
Yeah, so swordfish also, I think they were different. I'm not holding, like I'm not
And where
current.
did they make that distinction?
Yeah. So swordfish, I think there were disputes about how whether or not swordfish was kosher going back, I think, many generations. And I think in the 20th century, you had like rabbinic authorities dividing on whether swordfish was kosher. I think they have scales when they're little and the scales fall off or something as they get older. So that's I think sturgeon are kind of in that similar category. There's like disputes about whether, so some communities ate, some communities didn't. Some rabbis said yes, some rabbis said no. I think the like pendulum has been swordfish are not kosher, but I think maybe the pendulum is swinging back. Rabbi Herschel Schachter is a very influential rabbi in New York. I think he believes swordfish are kosher. And so he and his students will eat swordfish. Although I think they say they're an endangered species. You're not supposed to eat them right now anyway. Their populations need to recover. So I would say just don't eat swordfish for ecological reasons, if not for kosher reasons. Yeah, that's true. I mean, another interesting, turkey is an interesting example also because turkey anatomically is very similar to a chicken, right? When you cut it open, but there were no Jews ate it until the 16th century. But I think they thought that it was they thought it was from India. And so they thought that it was people thought that it was a tradition to eat that. And since it does have all the signs of a kosher bird, so most people eat turkeys, except there are, some Jews who are descendants of a rabbi who was very famously against, eating turkey. And so they don't eat turkey, but, the vast majority of Orthodox Jews eat turkey today. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Let's come back to our sheet. F, noting tam and tam nifgam. This is important. Okay, so sort of alluded already to the fact, I actually said explicitly, okay, that we're concerned, like the rabbis, introduce this concern not just with the non-kosher substance, but the taste of the non-kosher substance that's absorbed in pots, silverware, whatever, and then expelled from that into the next item that's cooked in that pot. And so things cooked in non-kosher pots can become non-kosher. Things cooked in dairy pots get the taste of the dairy, and then if they're meat, they can become non-kosher. I just said that. Now, this is only true if the taste that is absorbed and the taste that is then expelled is a positive taste in some way. If it's a negative taste, which could be contextual, could be like, I don't know, like the taste of, I don't know, like a meat in my strawberries and cream, like that's gross. And so that's like not, so even though I can taste it, it's not going to be a kosher concern because the meat taste that I'm like getting, is like a negative taste. Okay, so that's one possibility, but that's a little bit, could be subjective, a little bit harder maybe to tell what exactly is a contextually negative taste. But a taste that's rancid or tastes really, really negative, that's like less controversial. That's like obviously, that's the subjective, that's obviously bad. And so that's not going to create a kosher concern. Okay, so this means that this has like many, many practical implications that are incredibly important. So one, if I cook, my clam chowder in my clam chowder bowl, my chowder pot, okay? So the clam taste is absorbed in the walls of the pot. And then I put the pot on my shelf for 24 hours. What happens to that clam taste inside my chowder pot? It becomes rancid because it's been sitting inside absorbed inside the walls of a pot for 24 hours. And the rabbis taught us, any taste absorbed in a pot for 24 hours becomes rancid. I then cook pasta in my chowder pot. So that rancid chowder clam taste comes into my pasta. The pasta is absorbing a rancid clam taste. And that rancid negative taste is not going to be problematic vis-a-vis the kosher status of the pasta. Okay, kosher food cooked in non-kosher pots that haven't been used in 24 hours, that food is kosher. Okay. Meat cooked in dairy pots that were not used for dairy within 24 hours, that meat is kosher. Okay, lechatchila, like ab initio, okay? At the outset, we're not supposed to use non-kosher pots and pans even after 24 hours in case you come to use them within 24 hours. But accidentally, okay, right, after the fact, okay, if the thing hasn't been used for 24 hours, the kosher implications of the mistake are generally going to be minor. Because anything that's been absorbed, because generally the things are clean, we clean things out. Okay, the taste absorbed inside the walls, it goes rancid after 24 hours. Most things in my kitchen have not been used. We have an assumption actually. Most items in your kitchen have not been used for 24 hours. But I don't know for sure. I use this frying pan to make pancakes, dairy pancakes within 24 hours, I can assume that I haven't used it in 24 hours. And if I accidentally use it for meat, it's not going to have a kashrut problem. Because whatever dairy tastes is rancid, meaning the frying pan now is a problem because now it has dairy and meat absorbed in the walls of the frying pan. I may not be able to have to like deal with the frying pan, but the food is going to be kosher. Okay. Something made in a non-kosher pot, that's kosher food. Okay. That's in a restaurant, you can't make this assumption. Restaurants constantly use their pots and pans, and you can't assume that the restaurant hasn't, that you can't assume that the restaurant hasn't used that pot or pan for 24 hours. So even something with kosher ingredients made in a restaurant, you have to assume that pot was used for something non-kosher within 24 hours. And so that's going to be a problem. I guess unless you go to the restaurant right after they opened. They were closed for the weekend. It was a holiday weekend, they're closed, they're closed on Monday. And you go on Tuesday for lunch. The restaurant has, so maybe then you could rely on that assumption. But again, lechatchila, we don't, at the ab initio, we don't use non-kosher pots and pans utensils. Even if we know they haven't used 24 hours, but there's an assumption they have not used 24 hours in a private home. Big source of big leniency. Another leniency that comes from the same principle is that soap gives a rancid taste. So even if the food item, it doesn't taste rancid, if I mix it with soap, the whole mixture has a terrible negative taste. And so the kashrut implications are going to be not so bad. So if I accidentally put my dishwasher I have a dairy dishwasher, I only put dairy things in my dishwasher. I wash my dairy dishes in there. I accidentally put a meat fork in my dairy dishwasher. Okay. So the dairy that's in the dishwasher is being mixed with soap. That meat fork is going to come in contact with soapy meat. Okay. And so no kashrut implications. Okay, the meat on that fork is going to come in contact with soap. Okay, and so there's like soapy water mixture, and so I don't have to worry about there anything. So you put the wrong thing in the dishwasher, it's never a problem as long as you use soap. Make sure you use soap in your dishwasher. Okay, so often it's not a bad idea to get into the habit of sprinkling a little extra dishwasher powder outside the little container in your dishwasher. So that from the very moment the dishwasher starts turning on, there's always soap there. There's never a moment where the dishwasher is circulating hot water without soap. Okay. But if you're using soap, that's a huge grounds for leniency, again, after the fact if you make a mistake. So another sort of related, okay, I mentioned that taste is transferred, jumping back a minute, like I said this before, taste is transferred at very high temperatures, or if you soak things for 24 hours, like you soak, like a mouse falls into your tomato sauce and drowns there, and it's there for a couple of days, take the mouse out, so now the whole tomato sauce tastes like a mouse. That's not kosher because mice aren't kosher, okay? We assume 24 hours the taste spreads. If something is hot, taste transfers immediately, right? You have some boiling chicken soup and, some milk falls into it like that, that's about, I can't remember the milk, a piece of pork falls into your chicken soup. You remove the pork, but the taste spreads instantly, okay? Because it's hot. If things are not, so how hot does the thing have to be for the taste to transfer instantly? And the Talmud comes up with the answer, are they hot enough that your hand recoils? It's so hot you can't stick your hands in it. Okay, it means if you can stick your hands in it, it's by definition not so hot that you can't stick your hands in it, and therefore there's not going to be a transfer of taste. Which also means if you're doing dishes by hand, your hands are there in the dishes and you're scrubbing or whatever, you realize, oh my gosh, it's I accidentally mixed my dairy dish with my. So just rinse it off, make sure there's no actual dairy, make sure there's actual meat that are touching each other, make sure everything's clean. So there's soap, so that also means the taste is rancid. If there's no soap, if you're washing by hands, then it's not too hot for you to stick your hand in, and therefore it's not hot enough for the taste to actually transfer from something absorbed or from two different things. That's another huge ground for leniency after the fact. Okay, when these things happen, you also call me, right? People call their rabbis when they make mistakes and they accidentally stick the wrong spoon into the wrong. I get lots and lots of emails and texts about these types of kosher kitchen, like accidents. It's totally normal to call and ask a rabbi about these sorts of things, but these are the types of questions we go through to kind of find grounds for leniency. Questions, comments about what we said so far? It's totally fine if you don't. It's fine if you do. Okay. Let's do G and then we'll stop. G is, we'll do G and H. We'll do G and H. And then we'll stop. G is fish and meat. The Talmud says don't eat fish and meat together. It doesn't really say why. It says it's dangerous. We don't really know why it's dangerous. It's not about kashrut. There's no kashrut concern about dairy and meat together. It just seems to be seems to be, I don't know, maybe it's like if you eat, two different kinds of protein at one meal, it's like you'll attract, the jealousy of others, you'll get, attract the evil eye, instead of bad form to have, more, so many different kinds of protein at the same meal, whatever it is. We don't eat fish and meat together. So if you have a fish course at a meal, you like take away the plates and you rinse them and bring them back to the table, or you use fish plates, fish forks, and you don't use them for the meat course at your meal, and you rinse out your mouth. Okay, so that's the practice that we have. We don't really know why. Okay, so that you should just know about that. And then finally, H is
Rabbi, I had a
oh
question.
yeah, sure, please, thank you.
So I had a situation, I don't think it was a situation, but something happened where I don't eat meat, but I eat fish. And there was a dinner table and everyone's eating meat and I had my fish plate. Is it okay to have that at the same time if I'm only eating one, or should I?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's fine given I think that's fine. I think that's fine. You wouldn't I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. Yeah. All right. Koshering items. Okay, next item. Okay, next. Okay, so koshering, it means just to make something kosher. So the basic principle is that the way things go in, that's how they go out. So if you have something which absorbs non-kosher taste or dairy taste or meat taste by boiling, then you can get the taste out by boiling. So you boil your pot, and the non-kosher taste leaves the pot, and then it's there and it's gone, and you rinse it out. Okay, and that's true. Your fork, you can drop your forks in boiling water. Your pot, you fill with boiling water. You can drop a little thing inside the pot to kind of make it overflow a little bit, so you get the outside covered as well as boiling water. And in that way, you can kosher things that became non-kosher through boiling. Things that became non-kosher through direct contact with a non-kosher food, like a skewer or a roasting pan, you can't kosher with boiling water because it had a more intense connection with the non, right? So then those you have to heat with a blowtorch, or run in your oven under the self-clean cycle, something super hot, right? To kind of purge it in that way through intense heat. For things that's what you do for skewers if you want to kosher them, or barbecue grills, or maybe baking pans, things where the non-kosher food is directly resting upon it. So it's a little bit harder to kosher, but most things you can kosher in boiling water, immersing them in boiling water. So, okay, the way things go in, that's how they leave. Questions or comments on that? Okay. I think we'll pause here then. Let's sort of think about when we can meet next. I'll stop the recording and then we'll talk about when we can meet next.